Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. What's going on, Ricardo Lemonski?
What's up?
You watch that? You watch any of that? Chris Paul. Dude, we were just talking about Chris Paul. Not even close to that. Is
Chris
it
Paul?
Jake Paul. That fight.
Oh,
Watching that fight. Jake Paul get punked.
I didn't pay for it, but I had it on in the background.
I was in a Madden league, and somebody in the Madden league hooked me up with a link.
There you go.
So, I always like to see a YouTube star get his face punched in.
It was nice to see him lose because he was undefeated before then.
Facing dead boxers and
UFC fighters.
Yeah. Anyway,
dead ones. Yeah.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. We talk about fantasy football here and football in general. And we're entering an interesting part of the offseason this week. Hopefully we get these podcasts out on time. That way you get some of this content. But the Combine is starting this week. So a lot of, when all the teams get together to stare at young prospects, do workouts, there's usually a lot of discussion, a lot of dialogue, a lot of trade negotiations. I think they had the league meetings last week.
Yep.
Talk about rules or this week or whatever. But so a lot of things are happening at the same time here. The NFL offseason is fully in the bag, and we got, we're in full offseason mode. So without further ado in this offseason, we need to have some rankings. Right?
Super early though. And I will admit,
that's all right.
Doing these
how are they going to
rankings
move? In the top 12, how are they going to move?
Yeah, you're so right. They're not going to move. These are the set rankings
Set
for the
rankings
next year.
for August.
Doing these rankings, I was
That's
so disgusted
Mm-hmm.
in some of these spots. So
Yeah.
very well could change throughout the offseason, but this is just based on what we got right now.
Yeah. There's some guys that we will talk about that have some changes going on for their offenses. There's some guys that maybe don't have a quarterback yet, and we'll get to those guys. But with the information that we have currently, we are going to try to provide you with the best possible view of what we think the 2023 landscape is going to be in terms of rankings. So, and Rick was gagging making these rankings because you stared at him specifically for this position that we're going to talk about. And you go, what's going on?
Yeah, this was probably honestly,
strange.
I'm looking at the rest of other positions that we'll probably get to eventually, but this is probably the hardest one for me, running back.
Yeah. Yep. So it should be interesting. We'll get to. I do want to jump into some of that discussion and talk about the running back position as a whole because there is some wholesale changes coming. Specifically this year to that position. This is a very, I don't know the word I'm looking for, like not tumultuous, but it's a very risky season.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of things that could happen.
A lot of things that could happen. A lot of things that might happen. Even outside of that, I feel like by the time we get to August, we're going to look at these and go, man, we could just be dead wrong.
Yep. I think, not to mention that this running back class is probably the best one we've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Because I think was it last year's class that was kind of lacking.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
And even the class before that was good, but not great.
Running back classes are always. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, we did have Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker, so we did have two really good running backs. But I think this year's draft there's going to be like 3 or 4 guys that could end up being like top 15, top 20 running backs.
Right.
And then there's also a lot of veterans that we don't know if they have anything left in the tank that could fall off at any moment.
Yeah.
And then there's young guys that could emerge. So who are already in the league.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to kind of figure things out. And there's some young guys too that Well, we'll jump into it in a second. Let's do the intro stuff first. Before we jump into our top 12 running back rankings, part 1, so we're just going to talk about 6 today. Check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on a podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms, please leave a review, share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions you may have for us. So like we were discussing, we will only be doing the top 6 for this episode, and then we'll move on to the other 6 to kind of keep it expeditious. But like Rick said, lot of wholesale stuff going on at the running back position. This could be a really good class depending on where guys land. Like even Walker, we kind of looked at last year and was like,
right,
not great. 16 guys there, and then
who's the RB3? James Cook.
I think so. Might have been.
Maybe Rashad White.
So it was a lighter class, but Brees and Kenneth Walker ended up being really good. But like I said, there is some issues with some of these younger running backs. We have Javonte, who is dealing with a lot of injuries. I don't believe is in our top 12. I believe he'll probably be in our top 20 at least. So probably. That's good for him. But anyway, and then you have, Brees Hall, who got hurt. You have Kenneth Walker, who also sustained. Did he sustain an injury, or was he back?
He was injured in the beginning of the year.
Okay, so he's good. So it's like there's some guys that we would normally look at as like breakout players, and even when we get that far, Brees Hall is in our top 12. Not to spoil anything, but when we get that far and discuss Brees Hall, which I don't believe is on this episode, that is even a tough rank for me,
right?
Because it's like the Jets don't even have a quarterback that they trust right now.
The big thing with Hall, for me at least, is the injury. Because if he comes back and he's like,
Derek Carr's having a second meeting with the Indianapolis Colts.
Colts, what?
Yeah,
that's kind of odd.
Very odd.
He also had he's meeting with a bunch of different, because it's the combine. So apparently he's meeting with the Panthers. And then he's having a second meeting with the Jets and Saints. So we'll see where that leads.
To the Jets. Dude, he's lining it up. Anyway, so what were you saying about the running backs?
I was saying with Hall, like the bigger thing for me, at least with Brees, is just the injury.
Yeah.
I don't know, like if he comes back week 1 and he's at like 50% and he kind of has a J.K. Dobbins like season, you're gonna get screwed.
Oh yeah.
You have to make sure he's 100%, and coming off a torn ACL, like that's kind of hard to do.
It's tough because the running back position. Like if we were to look at our last year's rankings and look at players who had gotten hurt in the previous year, I'd like to see if we overrank them or underrank them, because I tend to get nervous when it's a guy who gets hurt. And like that is a guy, even if I rank them high, like it's typically a guy I try to avoid and go into an opposite direction, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So at the end of the day, it's kind of like I don't really know like what to do with these hurt running backs, because you want to really like them, but at the same time, it does take time, especially with leg injuries, for them to overcome that and become really good players.
Right.
And like you saw Barkley, great year 1. And then he ended up struggling with injuries for a couple of years before he was able to come out this year and have a really good season. So it's just, at the end of the day, it's extremely difficult, to predict what a player is going to do off an injury. But I think we do have enough data to be like, you can't rank them high if they're hurt or draft them if they're hurt, because if you do, you're going to get burned. Some guys can overcome it. But like even James Robinson, the Achilles injury. Do you remember we talked about over and over and over again? Everyone was like, James Robinson. Like, he's coming off an Achilles injury, and he came out for the first 3 weeks of the season. We were like, frick, we were wrong.
Right?
Where is he now? So it's like you just collapse very quickly with some of these injuries, and so you got to keep an eye on it. But anyway, you want to do some rankings?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's do it. So like I said, we're going to do 6 on this show after introducing the running back position for 10 minutes. We're going to do 6 on this show. We're going to do 6 on Thursday's show. And then I believe the following week we'll do wide receivers, part 1 and part 2. And then we'll do quarterbacks and tight ends in 2 separate shows. But anyway, so we'll do 6. We have a consensus this year. Last year, I remember we did wide receiver rankings, and I feel like we're trying so hard to do a couple of different things, and it just wasn't working with our rankings. So we consensitized our rankings into consensitized. We made a consensus of our rankings. We had a 3-way tie for 7, so we just kind of
we had 3 players all have the exact same grade, I guess.
Same grade, yeah. So anyway, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But anyway, let's start with the number 1 guy that Rick and I both have won. The first 2 players are agreed upon as 1s and 2s in the draft. I think, would you say this is tier 1?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Maybe I mean, the third guy gets in there, but
number 1 might be in his own tier.
Possibly. But so number 1 on our list is Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, we know what he did this year. We know how he performed and all of that stuff, and we talked about like over the in the consistent running backs program we did. We talked about how consistent he was and how he was above and beyond the most consistent running back in fantasy football last year. So I kind of, obviously know what CMC is at this point. To you, Rick, is there any kind of concern surrounding Christian McCaffrey in terms of, just to start off with some things that are negative about him, surrounding the situation with the 49ers quarterback? Is it Brock Purdy? Is it Trey Lance? Is it Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it somebody else that they haven't gotten yet? What's going on with San Francisco in that aspect? Because I feel like they have everything like wide open. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like they would even consider Aaron Rodgers. So it's like there's like 4 quarterback options that they could go with.
The thing with the 49ers, though, they're one of the few teams in the league that I really don't think, whatever decision they end up going with, I don't really think it's going to matter. Like, if they go Brock Purdy and he's healthy and he's ready to go for next year, they're still a playoff team. If they go Jimmy G again, they're still a playoff team.
Yeah.
Even if they go Trey Lance, unless he really, really sucks, they're probably still a playoff team. If they go Aaron Rodgers, they're a playoff. Like, I don't think it really matters. It's one of the only teams in the league that I feel like I can say that.
That's fair. But does it, so if Trey Lance comes out next year, right, and he looked anything like he did in the first couple games of the season this year, does that make you nervous for CMC?
Yeah, I mean, Trey Lance would, I think, probably make me the most nervous for CMC.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't affect it to the point where I don't think he would be the RB1. I think it would just kind of hurt his ceiling of what he could be capable of. With CMC, honestly, the biggest concern is what it has been the last couple of years, and that's injuries. Last year, he didn't get injured, and that was great to see. But the 2 years prior to that, he had pretty significant injuries where he missed a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be in the back of my mind with CMC. But outside of that, to me, he's the clear one.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, obviously, we know what he is. So to me, I want to start obviously with some negatives here and kind of work your way down. There's obviously injury concern, the lack of quarterback concern. I have a little bit of that as well, but I think when you just look at it overall, Christian McCaffrey's Christian McCaffrey. He hasn't changed really that much, and he's going to get, like, how many targets did he have this year? I'd love to actually really quickly with Christian McCaffrey, because we don't need to spend a million hours on him, but I'd love to see what his paced out numbers were for just his time with the 49ers.
He had 85 targets on the season, which is actually lower than his other 2 seasons where he was the RB1.
Okay, I have the paced out numbers. Should I take out the game that he started the first time where it was like Thursday night? I'll take the game. I'll just do started games with the San Francisco 49ers. So he had 257 rushing yards, 1,204 rushing yards, 257 attempts, 10 touchdowns per 17 games. That's just rushing. 107 targets, 85 catches, 748 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So we had 1,900, almost 2,000 all-purpose yards and 17 touchdowns, and 85 catches. So, I mean, that's monstrous. Like, if you have 101 next year,
Right.
You should probably take
CMC.
That's easy money. That was with a combination of quarterbacks.
Right.
Jimmy
that was
G,
Purdy.
Brock
That was
Purdy.
Garoppolo.
So like, if they have a steady quarterback, whether it's Trey Lance or whatever, I do think there should be a little bit of hesitation there because they don't have a quarterback, because they have so many questions there. Like, they are a good enough team to do things, but does one quarterback over another? Does 8 games of film through an entire offseason give defensive coordinators enough to look at Brock Purdy and be like, this guy blows? We can blow him up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, is there enough there for them to do that where he starts making mistakes, things start going sideways, and San Francisco is now going back to Trey Lance or switching quarterbacks and all of that stuff? I don't disagree with you, Rick. I think that doesn't really affect McCaffrey at all because they'll continue to just hand him the ball. That's what they do.
Right. Right.
But agreed 101?
Yes.
Okay. Number 2 is Saquon Barkley. The man, the myth, the legend. Came back from injury. The quad. Yes, he came back from injury, sucked last year, made me very nervous to the point where I was like, I'm not even drafting him in the second round. And then this season happened, and I changed my mind very quickly. He was very, very, very good. I traded CMC for Saquon, so that was a problem, but I got so excited. I held it too long. I could have just kept the guys I had and been fine. This is the one trade I'm like, could have held off. But anyway, Saquon is number 2 consensus for both of us. Why is he number 2 for you, Rick? And is there any concerns about Saquon going into next year?
Yeah, Saquon has the kind of similar concerns with McCaffrey where it's injury. As of right now, we don't know who his quarterback's going to be. We think it's probably Daniel Jones, but we don't know for sure. They haven't locked him up.
Yeah.
And honestly, we actually don't know for sure if Saquon's going to be on the Giants. So there are some question marks there.
Yeah.
For where we sit right now. But assuming he stays, assuming Daniel Jones stays, Saquon had a really good year last year. And I think his upside wasn't even fully reached. I know there was a game where he did miss some time, where he only had a 30% snap percentage in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still RB5 on the year, was still up there with guys like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. Wasn't too far off from McCaffrey.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think he really hit his ceiling. I think if the Giants play their cards right this offseason, they can definitely improve the offense. Dayball's the coach.
Yeah.
I think there's some a little bit left to be had there. I think he's probably the most explosive guy at the running back position in the NFL, or at least one of them, when he's on. So for me, it just comes down to, I guess, the next best guy in terms of ceiling, and that's Barkley for me. Yeah. But I do think he's not as, and it's kind of why I said you could make the argument McCaffrey's in his own tier at the 101, because I think you could actually go in a few different directions here at number 2, but I chose Barkley because I think it's just ceiling based.
Yeah. Yeah, those things are all true. I do think he has a higher ceiling. I don't think he can reach CMC.
Probably not.
But I do think he's a solid, like, when you're talking about whether you're number 1 or number 2, to me, it doesn't really matter. What you're looking for is a consistent, strong, top-end running back that you don't have to worry about on a week-to-week basis. And I think
which is Barkley if he's healthy.
That's Barkley if he's healthy. So I think the massive asterisk concern that there is with him is obviously injury. Didn't really deal with it at all this year, but if stuff starts creeping back in with Saquon, then you're obviously going to have some problems moving forward with your team. And I think that in and of itself, obviously McCaffrey has been dealing with injuries as well over the last couple of years, which is concerning. And he had another full healthy year. But like, if I had to choose one guy that I trust a little bit more not to get injured, it would probably be CMC over Barkley. Now, I will say 49ers don't have a great track record with running backs and injuries. So I don't know who their trainer is for the running back room, but they got to figure their crap out because I need CMC healthy to win my chips, right? So Saquon, I think he'll be fine. He's a great player. The only other minor concern I do have is pertaining to I don't think the Giants are all that good of a football team. And I think they won 9 games and everyone got behind the coach and, and got behind the quarterback and everything. But I just don't think the Giants are a good football team, really. And I don't think signing Danny friggin' Dimes for $45 million is not going to solve any problems. So they got some issues that they got to work through. I think they got a great coach. I think they can kind of make things work, but I would not be surprised if they're like a 5-win football team next year. And everyone's like, what happened to the Giants? And be like, they overperformed slightly, just a little bit. So.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think where they sit right now, they're definitely not as good as being a top 4 team in the NFC, which is what they were last year in terms of placing, because they were made to the divisional round. I don't think they're that good, but they do have some pieces there. They have some young talent. The offensive line is decent. The defense is decent. They have a good coach. So I do think they have some pieces there. And I actually think for Saquon's sake, having a better offense overall would help him if they go get a receiver, in the draft or free agency or trade or whatever. Maybe another offensive lineman. Like, just continuing to upgrade their offense is what
definitely.
If I had Saquon, is what I'd be looking for the Giants. But we'll see how it goes.
It is a little bit, because I do feel like both of these guys at the top make me a little bit nervous, only because age, injury history, all of that stuff. So I'm like, I'm
Is there a running back that you even? I mean, I would say probably maybe McCaffrey, but even him, like, he could get injured at any second. Is there a running back that you feel like completely confident in the whole league?
I don't. Not really. Probably no, not him either. I just looked through the entire list, and I don't think there's one single guy that I'm like.
Like, in the past, I feel like there's always been a guy,
but like this list, I really don't think there is one. Yeah. So maybe I should just shut up about injuries. Anyway, CMC 1, Barkley 2, number 3 on our consensus. This is one that we had different rankings on, and where we can actually start a discussion. But consensus right now for Rick and I is Austin Eckler. I have Eckler 3. Rick has Eckler 4. He just kind of fell into the 3rd spot because one of us ranked the next guy a little bit lower than the other. But so Eckler coming in at 3 for me, exactly at the spot I would have him. There is, I don't even like, I'm kind of with you, Rick. I feel like there's an opportunity for me if I get convinced of a couple other players that I would move Eckler down a spot or two. Just based on the last 2 years and the high end efficiency with the touchdowns and everything that comes along with Austin Eckler. Like, he's a great player in PPR. Like, we all know what he can do, but he's old and you can't score 18 touchdowns every year. It's just not going to happen. So, to me, I have him 3 because there is that pass catching upside. He is really good. He's got a great quarterback. The offense is really good. And I think he has a little bit of a higher floor than some of these other guys that we're going to talk about. And his situation's more solidified than some of the other guys that we're going to talk about. So I think he would definitely be a number 3, but I would not be shocked or stunned in any way if we get to the end of the season and Eckler has a down year and he's like between 10 and 12 instead of the top 5.
Right.
So, but I have him 3 just because I think he does provide a high floor and he's a good player to draft at 3, especially with the PPR upside. And if he keeps scoring touchdowns, I mean, hallelujah. So why do you have him 4 though?
Man, it's tough. He's a tough one. I said kind of, I think a couple times on the show since the season ended, I'm going to be a little bit lower on Eckler.
Yeah.
But some of the things, like, not to be positive on him, but some of the things you said is like absolutely true. And some of the negatives, like, for example, touchdowns.
Yeah.
2021, he had 20 total touchdowns. There's no way he can repeat that.
Yeah.
The next year, he gets 18. It's like, okay. So now he has 2 straight years with 18 or more touchdowns. There's no way he can repeat that. Well, he's on the Chargers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good offense.
Yep.
It's a good team.
Right.
Justin Herbert's his quarterback. So as long as they give him the work, he, in theory, should have a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
But it's hard to rely on that for 3 straight years because most of Eckler's fantasy points comes from touchdowns and catches.
Right.
And I think both those numbers, like last year, I mean, 127 targets is ridiculous. I really don't think that's going to happen again.
Probably not. Well, I mean, it might.
I mean, yeah, who knows? And in the beginning of
Nothing's
the
changed
year,
for them.
what was it?
Nothing really has changed for them. So
that's true. But in the beginning of the year, they were trying to use like Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller. They even had Sony Michel, and like they were trying. It felt like watching Chargers games that they were trying so hard to get another guy going, and they all just sucked. So that eventually, like at some point in the season, they were just like, "Screw this! We're going to give Eckler 25 touches a game." And I don't know if they want to keep doing that. I feel like they're at a point where they can kind of go easy on Eckler, and the age is another big thing. He's going to be 28 this season. He's 27 right now. He turns 28 in May. I don't really know, man. It feels like it's coming. The drop-off is coming. And I don't really want to rely on Eckler. And I know ranking him at 4 after he was the RB1 in PPR is kind of tough, but I'm not super comfortable with him.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of have the same, I kind of have the same concerns as you, with Eckler, which is why I would move him down. And my brain just kind of, I just want to move him down. I don't know what
yeah,
I'm having an existential crisis with Austin Eckler.
He's never had 1,000-yard rushing.
Yeah, no, that's never.
It's like purely pass catching and touchdowns.
But no, I like I said, with that particular player, it is at this point tough to look at him and be like, okay, we can anticipate that top 3, season that he put up this year. And in some cases he was RB1, right? I
mean, he was RB1 in PPR, and last year he was RB2.
And it's like, but it's just to see that repeat for a third year in a row is very challenging for me. Like, I don't think it's possible. So, I put him at 3 right now because I do think he's the third best running back available at this point, third most consistent running back. But we'll have to wait and see. Number 4 on our consensus list is Josh Jacobs. I have Josh Jacobs 5. Rick has Josh Jacobs 3. So Rick moved him 1 spot ahead of Austin Eckler on his rankings. Love Josh Jacobs. Think he's fantastic. Only reason why I don't have him number 3 ahead of Eckler is because they don't have a quarterback. And I don't know what they're going to do with the quarterback position. I don't know where they're going to go with that position. I don't know if they're going to stick with Jarrett Stidham, draft a guy, or sign or trade for Aaron Rodgers. Like, I have no idea what the Raiders are going to do at quarterback. And there's a large range of outcomes if that happens. If Jarrett Stidham's their quarterback, I'm concerned about Josh Jacobs. If Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback, then Josh Jacobs might be number 2 for me. So it depends on what you're doing, but I think one thing's for sure with the Las Vegas Raiders is that they know what they want to do, and that's run the ball with Josh Jacobs. Now, do I think that there could be a little bit of hesitation to give him as much work as they did last year, considering how good he was? Yes, I think that they will probably try to work his. I think this year, after they found out Zamir White sucked, I think they were just kind of like, all right, let's run this guy into the ground. We're not going to need him after this year. We didn't pick up his option. We don't really, at this point, we don't really care what happens. Unfortunately, it's sometimes how NFL teams think, but specifically with running backs. But I think he did so well at this point that you can't not have him a part of your team and not have him a part of your staff. So I think Jacobs has got to be in the top 5, at least in rankings, because he had such a good year. He got so much opportunity. He started to get work through the air. This obviously could take a massive change if the Raiders do what Josh McDaniels' blood has been trained to do, which is, go get running backs. And, they might draft a guy. They might bring a guy in through free agency. And if that happens, then I'm a little bit more concerned about Jacobs. But as long as he is the guy and they're giving him 20, 25 touches a game, Josh Jacobs is going to be in my top 5, and he's probably going to be number 4 on my list every single time. So,
yeah, and for me, like I feel like they kind of unlocked something this year with Jacobs. As you said, like they kind of. I don't think they had Jacobs in their long-term plans in the beginning, but he just played so well to the point where they kind of force him into that. I do think he's going to resign. And the way he played last year, and it was under McDaniel, so they're going to have the same coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're going to utilize him in the same way if he comes back. And if they do that, then the quarterback position is a concern, but I don't think I really don't see them going with Jared Stidham next year. I think they're either going to try to go get Garoppolo or Rodgers, one of those veteran guys, or they're going to draft somebody, and they're probably going to have to trade up to do that. And if so, if they have a rookie quarterback, they're going to be running the football a lot. So he's going to get a ridiculous amount of touches. Will it maybe just hurt the offensive ceiling of the team if they have a rookie quarterback? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
But was their offense really that good last year? It was kind of mid.
Yeah.
Derek Carr wasn't that great. So I don't know. For me personally, I just think Jacobs, as long as they utilize him the same way they did last year, he to me is going to be one of my favorite picks because he's a very, kind of what you mentioned with Barkley, you're just looking for that guy who's going to be the stable RB1. I think that's exactly what Jacobs will be for you. Now, I think because with these rankings, I did make him for half PPR. I think you can make the argument for Eckler over Jacobs in PPR, especially because of how ridiculous Eckler is when it comes to catching the football. But it's a toss-up. I think these guys are definitely interchangeable.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, we got two more guys to talk about. Consensus, we have number 5, Jonathan Taylor.
This was gross.
I have Jonathan Taylor 4. Rick has Jonathan Taylor 5. Jonathan Taylor ECR, by the way, what is he, 3?
He's 2 or 3.
Yeah, so I need to be convinced on Jonathan Taylor. If Derek Carr goes to I'm not excited about it if Derek Carr goes to the Colts, but I do think that he's better than any other quarterback that they brought in over the last couple of years.
That's so
yeah, it is so mid, but it's they have a great offensive line, right? They have some good receivers, and they have a great running back, and they have a new head coach who his name is escaping me.
He was the Eagles offense coordinator. I forget his name.
I
don't want to say
Steichen?
Shane Steichen? Something like that.
Shane Steichen. Is that it?
Shane something.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm gonna look it up. Colts HC. Yeah, Shane Steichen. So this is not bad. Just look at what the Eagles did this year, right?
Yeah,
they like to run.
That's true,
and they're gonna like this running back they got in Jonathan Taylor. So if offensive line plays better, right, and you have Jonathan Taylor, and that's the guy you're running it with, then realistically, if they go out and they get a Derek Carr or they draft a young quarterback, I don't mind Jonathan Taylor as much as people normally would. He had a down year, and he was on and off the field. He kind of sucked when he was on it. And there was a lot of bad things going on with that offensive line. But I think one thing's for sure is that Indianapolis needs to run the football. And there's no way that they can look at their team and go, oh, well, you know what? Let's keep trying to huck the ball all over the field. They need to run the ball. And they would lose their identity with Frank Reich, with, Jeff Saturday, regularly, where it was just they wouldn't run the football. And it's what are you guys doing? Your identity is running the football with Jonathan Taylor. And you have zero clue what you're doing. So, anyway, the offensive line is good. They will come back and they will improve. They have an offensive-minded head coach. They're going to run the football. I think Jonathan Taylor should be fine coming into the season. I will say, massive butt risk.
Yeah.
After this season, drafting him top 5 blindingly.
I don't think
that's insane to me, but
I think we're going to see, if let's say our consensus is the way that a draft goes, I think you probably see Justin Jefferson slide in here before we get JT. Would be my guess. But either way.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor, for sure, you touched on all of it. Super risky. And kind of the concerns you have about Josh Jacobs with the quarterback is there. The concerns of him not producing last year is there. the offensive line, which has been great, as you said, wasn't that great last year. And I don't know why. I mean, they were okay, but they were not near at the level that they used to be. I don't know if they're getting old, what's going on there, but that's trending downhill, which isn't good. And I also don't know, maybe because like teams got to a point where they dared them to throw the football and they didn't, or if they didn't, Taylor would just get stuffed because there's just so many guys in the box. But who knows, right? There's just a lot of concerns with Jonathan Taylor, but we've seen what his ceiling is, right? Yeah. RB1 the year before. As a rookie, he was the RB6. So like we know he's kind of in the same spot of like Barkley was last year in a sense, or the year before that, where we know the kind of player he can be. He's just coming off some really disappointing runs. So I personally, I would be okay with taking Jonathan Taylor. I know there's going to be a lot of people, especially more casual people, that are going to be completely out on him. Yeah. And are not going to want him on their teams.
Yeah. Which that in and of itself could push him down boards.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for. Right. And I would still take him. But it is risky. There's no doubt about it. It is risky.
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. I would say he's the riskiest guy in the top 5. Because
I'd agree.
Like he's top 5 in our rankings, but like, and you have him. Where did you have him again? You had him 5, yeah. So like, I think because of all of those factors that we just talked about, like he carries all of that risk with him, and it makes it challenging for me to put him ahead of guys like Eckler, Jacobs, Barkley, CMC. Makes it even challenging for me to put him ahead of like guys like Kenneth Walker, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb. Like, just based on the season he had, like I'm scarred and I didn't even have him. So like it's challenging. But anyway, the final guy we have is Kenneth Walker. I'm sorry. That is not true. It's Nick Chubb. It could go anyway because these 3 next guys are tied. But we'll say Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, I have him ranked 8. Rick has him ranked 6. Why do you have him ranked 6, Rick? Give us this is your guy. For the first time ever, you ranked him higher than I did.
Yeah, I told you this before.
Yeah.
That I really had no idea what to do after Jonathan Taylor. The next like 4 or 5 guys are just like, especially the next 3 really, and it kind of shows in our rankings are totally in the same tier, and you can just mix match whatever the way you want. I had Chubb as the highest guy because the first thing I thought of was Kareem Hunt is most likely not coming back. Yeah. There's rumors that he's a free agent. I don't think they're going to sign him. So this is the first time that we could see Nick Chubb in a while get kind of the full, complete workload that, a guy like Derrick Henry, a guy like Saquon, a guy like Jacobs did last year got. And not that Chubb doesn't usually get that, because last year he actually had a career high in carries at 300. But I think we're going to see that again this year with hopefully some slightly increased passing work as well. And last year he was the RB6, which was, of course, the year I was out on Nick Chubb was finally his best season. But yeah, with Kareem Hunt most likely out of the picture, I think that's kind of what you're looking at. He's not going to have the ceiling. He doesn't have the ceiling as Jonathan Taylor. He doesn't have the ceiling of Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey, but he's got an extremely high floor, probably a higher floor than Taylor, maybe even a higher floor than Josh Jacobs. Like, you know what you're getting out of Nick Chubb. You know you're getting a low end, or at least at worst, a low end RB1. Last year, again, he finished as the RB6. And with Hunt gone, it could open the door potentially for a slightly better season for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my argument.
I hope that what's his name? Deshaun Watson is better than the garbage that he showed this year. But it didn't matter really for Nick Chubb at all, whether it was him or Jacoby Brissett, because Chubb was fantastic. Right. But the question for me is like, you always ask the question, like, is a player in a good offense, right? Specifically with the running back position and wide receiver position. Like, because if you're not in a good offense, i.e. Michael Pittman, right? We thought they were going to be a little bit better this year with Matt Ryan than they were, and obviously that didn't work out, and Michael Pittman was in and out of the lineup. But, like, if you pick a guy that's not in a good offense, it burns you. And I think, people buy into the crap all the time with these players if they're really, really good and they're just in bad offenses. And there's very few players who can actually overcome that in the NFL. Like, Saquon is one of those guys that in his rookie year did that, where he just put the entire friggin' offense on his back and was the offense. There's not many players that can do that at the running back position, right? Nick Chubb has consistently, regardless of the situation for the Browns, been really good on the ground. He averages, he averaged 5 yards a carry this year, 1,525 yards rushing. That's insane. Receiving-wise, he doesn't really put up, like, he had 37 targets this year, 27 catches, 239 yards. He doesn't really put up the receiving numbers. He can receive. He's not bad at that. But I don't know what they're going to do with Kareem Hunt. They might move on. They might not. I don't know. But if they do, like, it didn't really matter rushing-wise for Nick Chubb last year in terms of the rushing numbers. But passing-wise, if Kareem Hunt is gone, is there some kind of upside that brings to Nick Chubb? And if that's the case, there could be a higher ceiling. Like, Nick Chubb's one of those players that we would both say, Rick, is probably a top 3 running back in the NFL.
Yes.
Like,
non-fantasy related.
Not fantasy related. So when does he ascend as a running back into the top 3, 4, or 5 in fantasy football? Because he's been good for years, and he's been a top 10 running back for a long time. Been very, very good.
Right.
When does he get into that? I mean, he didn't do it this year, right? I hope not.
He was RB6.
Okay, all right. Just about. But, like, when does he get into the top 3 like Dalvin Cook was in those years?
Yeah.
And
I don't know. Like,
it's the receiving.
He needs pass catching.
Yeah, he needs the receiving work to make it happen. So, Does he get that this year if Kareem Hunt is gone? I don't know. He needs at least 50 targets to change that. So,
right. I think,
goodness gracious,
Kareem Hunt's first year with the Browns, where he played, I think, half the season.
Mm-hmm.
That year, Nick Chubb had 36 catches, which is still to this day his career high, 49 targets. I think if he could do something like that again this year, like if he gets close to 35, 40 catches with like a receiving touchdown or two, that doesn't sound like insane receiving numbers, but for Nick Chubb it is. That would be a career high. If he can do even just that, he's probably a top 5 running back in fantasy.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's why I have him there. I don't know what I was smoking last year. I should have just stuck to my heart
guns.
and kept rolling with Nick Chubb.
But yeah, any more thoughts on Chubbulus?
No, I think that's
okay.
it.
There is your top 6 consensus running backs for Rick and I. Nice to be doing some rankings. We're going to change them a million times. We'll talk about them again in like 5 months. But anyway, there you go. We got part 2, the bottom 6 of the top 12 on Thursday. See you then. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.